Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the mud-caked sandals of an ancient Egyptian peasant. You wake before the sun even considers rising. Tucked inside a cramped mud-brick house by the banks of the Nile. The air is still cool from the night, and there's a hint of river mist wafting through the cracked doorway. You can hear the croak of frogs, the distant bray of a donkey, and someone already coughing up yesterday's dust a few huts away. The straw mat beneath you scratches against your back as you sit up. The only light comes from a tiny oil lamp your wife kept burning through the night, a flickering flame, its fuel stretched thinner than your patience. There's no rooster crowing here. The sound that gets you moving is your mother's voice reminding you that the fields won't plow themselves. You rub the sleep from your eyes, stretch your aching limbs, and silently curse that rock you stubbed your toe on last night. Again, there's no time for breakfast. Not that you'd call yesterday's leftover onions and barley mash a meal anyway. You chew a piece of dried fig from your cloth pouch, ignoring how it tastes faintly of goat. You reach for your linen kilt, threadbare but still holding, and splash your face with water from a chipped clay jar. It's barely a rinse, but it'll do. Before stepping outside, you kneel before the tiny altar in the corner. A clay statue of Hathor, gifted to your family long ago, watches with a cracked smile. You murmur a quick prayer, something between gratitude and a plea. Not for riches, not for power, just for a day without blisters. Maybe less yelling. Outside, the village begins to stir. Thin columns of smoke rise from cook fires. A kid chases a chicken through the narrow alley, barefoot and shrieking with delight. Your neighbor, Old Maku, squats at his doorstep, sharpening his hoe. His face looks like it's been carved from leather and frowns more often than the sun shines. The sun itself finally peeks over the palm trees, casting long shadows across the flat rooftops. Your home is part of a cluster dozens of identical mud brick cubes, each barely large enough to house a goat comfortably, let alone a family of 6. The walls are streaked with soot and child-sized handprints. You don't remember the last time they were whitewashed. As you trudge past, someone calls out, "Watch out, it's tax day soon." You groan. Tax day isn't marked on a calendar. It's marked by the arrival of the scribe and his silent sandal-wearing enforcer. You feel your shoulders tighten just thinking about it, but there's no time to worry about that now. You hoist your Tula curved wooden hoe with a flint blade tied on with twin and head toward. Your wife hands you a small woven bag on the way out. It's got a chunk of bread and a boiled duck egg. You give her a quick nod of thanks. She's already chasing the youngest, who's trying to eat clay again. You pass the granary and the beer hut on your way. The granary doors are locked, and the guards pretend they don't know you. One day, you joke to yourself, you'll be rich enough to bribe them for the good wheat. The beer hut, on the other hand, always smells like yeast and regret. You make a mental note to stop by later, if your back survives the day. Once you're outside the village proper, the real world of the Nile Valley opens before you. Fields of emmer wheat and barley, scattered with palm trees and workers. The land is flat and cracked in places, still drying from the recent flood. A distant herd of cattle munches lazily while a flock of ibises pick through the mud. You feel the sun beginning to warm your shoulders. Soon, it'll be unbearable. Egyptian peasants didn't have sunscreen unless you count crocodile dung, which some healers swore by. Historians still argue whether this was practical medicine or just a cruel prank. You glanced up at the sky. Clear blue. No clouds. No mercy. You shift your hoe to the other shoulder and pick up the pace. The overseer doesn't like latecomers. When you arrive, he's already there. Tall, sunburned, and smirking. His name is Renif, but everyone just calls him the Shout. He's got a voice like a cracked gong and uses it liberally. Behind him, a government scribe watches from under a canopy, scribbling something with a reed pen. That man's hands have never touched a hoe in his life, but he decides how much grain your family eats next month. Work begins with no ceremony. You fall into rhythm with the others, swinging your hoe into the soil, turning it over row by row. The first hour is the easiest. After that, it becomes something more primal, a trance of sweat, breath, and repetition. You talk little. You don't need to. Everyone here speaks the same tired language of grunts and sunburns. Somewhere nearby, someone starts singing, a slow, rhythmic chant to keep pace. It tells the tale of a prince who tried to sail without oars and ended up married to a crocodile. You chuckle under your breath. That story gets better every time. As the sun climbs higher, you pause to wipe your brow. Your hands are blistered. Your back protests. You're thirsty, but the well is a 20-minute walk, and you can't leave your row unfinished. You glance over at the scribe. He's still writing, probably noting whose form is sloppy, whose work is lazy, who might be hiding grain come harvest. But the worst part, you know he doesn't care. To him, you're a unit of productivity, a name in demotic script, and tomorrow, you'll be the same again. And yet, you keep going, because you have no choice. Because the Nile gives, and Pharaoh takes. Because your children need food. Because, frankly, no one else is going to do it. And just when you think your body will collapse like a dropped basket, someone calls a break. You drop your hoe with a grunt that sounds like it came from your spine, not your mouth. The call for break is a sound sweeter than harp music, though. You've only heard that once, when a noble passed through your village with a traveling troupe and everyone was told to look happy or else. You stretch your arms toward the sky, which at this point feels like it's pressing down on you. The heat has fully arrived, thick and unwavering. Your linen kilt is damp with sweat, clinging uncomfortably, and your skin already itches from dust and tiny bites from unseen things. You walk barefoot through the rows of turned soil, your feet sinking slightly into the warm, damp earth. It squelches pleasantly, despite the smell. The Nile's gift. People say the silt left behind by the annual flood. Without it, no crops. With too much of it, well, you get what happened last year, when the river decided to flood higher than the gods themselves could predict, swallowing a dozen villages and a fair number of confused goats. You reach the shade of a skinny fig tree. It's more symbolic than functional. The shade barely covers your shoulders, but hey, it's cooler than nothing. A few others are already there, sitting in a lazy circle, sharing what little they've brought for the break. The conversation is slow, sticky with heat. You plop down next to a man named Didu. His beard is more dust than hair, and his belly always seems suspiciously full for someone who never steals from the granary. He offers you half of his onion and a wink. You pretend not to notice that his bread looks suspiciously fresh. Lunch is modest. Your wife packed well, considering the flatbread is stale but edible. The duck egg tastes like sulfur and sand, which is too... You crack jokes about someone's mother-in-law turning into a crocodile, and someone else swears they actually saw a lizard walk upright and whisper to a priest. Laughter is brief. Energy is precious. Did you hear? Did you mumbles through a mouthful that the priest caught a servant taking one of the sacred cats with... You raise your eyebrows. What happened to him? Let's just say he's not working in the temple anymore. You all nod in agreement. No one messes with the cats. In fact, it's probably safer to slap a noble than to step on a temple cat. That's one of those quirks that makes Egypt. Historians still argue whether the reverence for cats came from genuine, religious, or just a very smart feline PR campaign. As the food disappears and conversation shifts to more mundane things like whose neighbor owes whom a chicken ear, someone else notices and mutters, "Please not, another tax patrol." But no, it's just a group of children racing along the field's edge, flinging clumps of dirt at each other and shrieking with glee. You can't help but smile. They've got nothing but sticks and mud. But right now, they look richer than Pharaoh. One of the kids veers off and runs towards you, panting. It's your youngest son, Kebi. His face is streaked with snot and triumph. "I won," he shouts, holding up something round and brown. You pray it's not dung. Thankfully, it's just a beetle. "Sacred scarab," he insists. "Probably just a regular bug." But you nod solemnly anyway. Let him have his victory. He flops onto your lap without asking and starts poking at your chin. "Why do you have whiskers and not Mama?" "She's smarter than me," you say. "She plucks them so they don't tickle her when she drinks beer." He giggles, and for a moment, the aches disappear. But only for a moment. The shout of the overseer rolls across the field again, breaks over. You hand Kebi the rest of your fig and ruffle his tangled hair before shooing him off. He scampers away, already shouting about crocodiles and flying donkeys. You stand, bones popping in protest, and head back to your row. The sun is directly above now, glaring down like a judgmental relative. You pick up your hoe. It feels heavier than before. Somehow, maybe it absorbed all your regrets during lunch. Back to work. You return to the rhythm dig. Turn, clear, step, over and over. Your shadow now curls up beneath you, trying to avoid the sun altogether. At one point, you pass the scribe again. He doesn't look up, but you know he's watching. Probably writing something like, "Peasant 43, slightly less lazy than yesterday. Might die soon." You resist the urge to wave. As the afternoon stretches on, your mind begins to wander. You think about the flood that's coming soon, and whether the canal walls will hold. You think about how many bricks you'll have to mold to repair your house before the rainy season. You'd think about your neighbor's daughter, whose dowry includes a goat and a cursed amulet. Apparently, you try not to think about the blister on your heel, which now feels like it has its own heartbeat. Someone in the row next to you starts singing again. This time, it's a song about how the stars are really the eyes of the gods, blinking down at us from their golden boats. It's beautiful, in a tired sort of way. You hum alone, out of tune but sincere. Just as your fingers begin to cramp and your thoughts turn to whether you'll ever feel your spine again, a small breeze stirs the air. A miracle, truly. It carries the scent of the river, of distant bread fires, and unfortunately a dead fish. But you take what you can get. You pause just long enough to tilt your face into the wind and close your eyes. And for a second you imagine you're in the royal palace, fanned by servants and fed grapes by dancers. Then someone sneezes nearby and sprays mud across your legs. Back to reality. You don't even bother wiping the mud off your leg. What's the point? You're already a living sculpture of dust, sweat, and Nile silt. You just reposition your hoe and keep digging. Swing, turn, lift. The rhythm isn't comforting anymore. It's hypnotic. You're not even sure what time it is anymore. The sun hasn't moved, but it feels closer, like it's leaning in to watch you suffer. The overseer, now still the shout, paces along the rows, inspecting every swing like he owns the dirt. Technically, he does. Well, Pharaoh does. But Pharaoh's probably reclining somewhere on a leopard-skinned couch, getting his toes oiled by someone whose job is just to... You, however, are being watched like a slow ox. Suddenly, Renuf stops next to you. He eyes your row of freshly turned soil, squats, digs a hand into the dirt, and holds it up. Then, he lets it fall slowly through his fingers like he's some kind of dirt connoisseur. Humph, he mutters. Too dry. You didn't dig deep enough. You resist the urge to ask if he'd like to do it himself. Instead, you nod, gritting your teeth so hard your jaw twitches. He marks something on his palm with a stick. Great, that's going into the ledger. The scribe, sitting nearby under his woven shade canopy, watches with mild interest. He's got a scroll of papyrus in his lap, and one of those smug little reed pens, dipping it occasionally into a pot of black ink made from soot and gum. You've never seen him sweat. That's suspicious in and of itself. This scribe is names. IP asks for your name. You give it. He writes it down with that annoyingly neat little flourish. Delda probably practices in the mirror. You know, the moment your name hits that papyrus, you're being measured. Your work, your attitude, your yield, everything you do today will be used to justify how much grain you owe during harvest. Not to mention how much the temple gets, how much goes to Pharaoh's storehouses, and how much ends up mysteriously missing. And if there's not enough grain, well, you clearly weren't working hard enough. Or maybe the gods were angry. Probably both. Historians still argue whether these scribes were pure heroes keeping the state afloat, or just glorified spies with good handwriting. But you know this. When the scribe writes, your family eats less. The worst part, you've seen people cheat the system. Some peasants bribe hippie with a fish or a goose to fudge the numbers. Not you. You tried once with a honey cake your wife made for the solstice. He took it, smiled, and still gave you the same cursed grain tax. You should have just eaten the cake. Just as you're starting to plot minor acts of rebellion, Renuf claps his hands. Canal team. Now, your stomach drops. You're one of the unlucky few assigned a double duty. After field work, you help maintain the irrigation canals. Because what's better than 8 hours of digging for more hours of hauling waterlogged muck? You joined the canal team, trudging over a ridge to the main ditch that feeds this whole section of farmland. The smell hits first stagnant water, moldy reeds, and the faint undertone of something dead. Possibly a frog, possibly your enthusiasm. The canal wall has partially collapsed, and the water's not flowing right. That's a problem. If it doesn't get fixed, the fields dry up. If the fields dry up, you don't get grain. If you don't get grain, the tax collector takes your goat. And if the goat's gone, you're back to trading chicken feathers for lentils. The overseer barks orders while two men dive into the muck. Thigh deep, you're given a basket to fill with silt. You don't ask if it's woven tight enough to hold waterlogged mud. You already know the answer. Hours pass in a super slime and back pain. At one point, someone tries to wrangle a wriggling catfish out of the canal, nearly falls in, and gets a cheer from everyone. Morale. It's a slippery concept. Like that fish. You pause to stretch your arms and glance up. A bark floats lazily in the distance, one of the government patrols. It's got the temple's sun disk painted on the side, and the men aboard wear pristine white linen robes. They're probably there to inspect, which means float by, shout a few vague threats, and disappear before dinner. You try not to think about the irony, while you break your back fixing the canal. Some priest is likely standing on that boat, composing a poem about the strength of the people. Oof! You and the others finally rebuild the wall using mud bricks and palm trunks lashed together with twine. It's haphazard, but it'll hold. For now, someone makes a joke about how you should all be buried with your hoes, since they're your true wives. You'll laugh, but inside, you'll kind of agree. The sun is beginning to descend at last, bathing the water in gold. It'd be beautiful if your knees weren't screaming and your hands weren't blistered and your entire lower half didn't feel like it had merged with the canal. Still, the worst of the work is over. Or so you think. Renev calls for a final inspection. You line up while he walks along the canal wall, tapping it with his staff. He nods at some spots, frowns at others, stops at you. Next time, he says, "Less mud on the bricks. You're wasting the mix." You want to reply, "Then give us better bricks." But instead you just bow your head. After what feels like an eternity, he waves a hand. Done. You drop your basket and slump to the ground. A few others do the same, while one unlucky soul trips and lands face first in the canal. That gets a round of applause. You lie back on the hard earth and look up at the sky. It's turning orange now, streaked with pink. A hawk glides overhead, and you wonder what it'd be like to fly above this all of it silent, watching, untouchable. But you're not a hawk. You're a peasant, and you've still got to walk home. Your legs protest every step as you begin the slow shuffle home, dragging your hoe behind you like it's the tail of some sad, exhausted animal. The sun is dipping toward the horizon now, finally less cruel, though the heat still clings to you like an overenthusiastic cat. The Nile glimmers in the distance, reflecting the colors of the sky. It's almost beautiful if your sweat didn't smell like crushed onions in despair. The road home isn't paved, of course. It's just a hard-packed trail of dust and ruts, worn smooth by years of sandals, carts, and goats with a death wish. Along the way, you pass a few familiar faces. A boy with a basket of reeds waves at you. You think he might be your cousin's son, or maybe your cousin's neighbor's son. You're too tired to remember. Someone else is wrangling a goose that seems entirely uninterested in being wrangled. You finally reach your village, just as the light turns syrupy gold. The mud brick homes seem to glow. Smoke rises from cook fires, and the smell of something charred but edible fills the air. You duck into your doorway and immediately trip over your youngest. Again, he's still carrying that beetle from earlier, now wrapped in linen and named Pharaoh. Your wife doesn't even look up. She's seated near the back wall, threading flax fibers through a spindle. Her fingers move fast, her face set in that familiar expression, determined, mildly irritated, deeply focused. She glances at you, eyes trailing over your mud-smeared arms, and says, "You smell like fish and failure." You respond with a grunt and a wink. Better than cat and curses. She smirks and tosses you a chunk of dried date. It's hard as a stone but sweet. You chew it slowly, letting the sugar do its small miracle inside your mouth. Now comes the second half of your day. Housework. You don't get to collapse yet, not until the animals are fed, the walls patched, the sleeping mats are shaken out, and the goat is shooed off the roof. Again, you start with the wall. A corner of it has cracked again from the last tremor. Egypt doesn't get proper earthquakes, just little shudders, like the gods are adjusting their chairs. You mix some wet clay, slap it into the gap, and smooth it out with a flat stone. The scorpions will still find a way in, but maybe not tonight. Then, it's the goat. Her name is Mana, and she's the true ruler of this household. She's currently perched on the roof, chewing on your neighbor's laundry line and looking smug. You clamber up the side ladder and spend the next 5 minutes coaxing, pushing, and eventually carrying her down. She rewards you by peeing on your leg. You've accepted this as love. Next, the water jars. Your wife's already filled most of them. Bless her. But one is cracked. You try to fix it with resin and twine while your eldest son asks a million questions. Why does water fall? Can birds talk to the gods? If you eat honey and fish together, do you explode? You answer vaguely while trying not to glue your fingers together. He's a bright kid, probably too bright for this life. You've considered sending him to the temple school, but the entrance fee alone could buy a new donkey. And besides, who will help with the goats? Your daughter sits beside her mother, practicing spinning with a smaller spindle. She's frowning so hard it looks like she's trying to summon a storm. The thread keeps breaking. She blames the spindle, You suspect it's her impatience. Patience, you say, gently. Even gods don't finish a thread in one spin. She glares at you. Then maybe the gods should try harder. Fair point. Dinner is simple. Lentil stew, some pickled radish, and that one onion you were hiding behind the grain bin. Your wife saw you put it there, of course. She always knows. You all sit on the floor around a flat stone plate, eating with your fingers. No one talks much. Everyone is too tired, too hungry. The only sound is chewing, slurping, and the occasional hiccup from the baby, who's chewing on a reed toy that used to be a broom. After eating, you stretch out on the floor, your back pressed to the cool clay. Your bones ache in places you didn't know had bones. Your wife leans against the wall, cradling the baby. The other two kids curl up on a mat beside you, arguing softly about whether stars are made of fire or God. You stare up at the ceiling. It's just woven reeds and mud, patched in places with old cloth and beetle shells. But it holds, mostly. A knock at the doorway breaks the quiet. It's Didu, of course, shared half-tucked a grin that says, mischief, and two clay jugs of questionable liquid. Beer hut, he asks, though it's not really a question. You glance at your wife. She rolls her eyes, but there's a hint of a smile. Don't fall into the well this time, she says. You follow Didu out into the night. The beer hut isn't really a hut. It's a lean-to beside the granary, with some broken pots for stools, and a fire pit in the middle. The beer's been brewing in sun-heated jars all day, and it smells aggressive. But after a few sips, you don't care. A group is already there laughing, cursing, singing bits of songs half-remembered from festival days. Someone's carving a crude fish into a scrap of wood. Someone else is trying to remember how to play a flute made from a vulture bone. The conversation drifts, as it always does. Gossip, rumors, complaints. Did you hear? Someone says, they caught a man stealing bricks from Pharaoh's tomb. Said he wanted to build his own tomb. You snort. Bet he didn't plan to decorate it with curses. Another man leans in. I heard the tomb's full of gold. And snakes. God snakes. Sacred ones. Historians still argue whether sacred tomb snakes were real. You say, a bit tipsy. Everyone laughs. No one knows what a historian is. Didu raises his cup. To us, the builders of canals, the carriers of Egypt, the keepers of goats, the punchlines of gods. You raise yours too. The beer tastes like sour bread and river mud. It's perfect. For a while, you forget the blisters. You forget the tax ledger. You forget how hard tomorrow will be. You just sit in the glow of the fire, surrounded by laughter, clay pots, and people who know your pain, your village, your chaos, your beer. And for a moment, you're rich. Morning comes too fast and too bright. Your skull feels like it's been stuffed with hot sand and regret. The beer blessed left a dull throb behind your eyes and a taste in your mouth that might be burnt lentils or last week's fish. Hard to tell. You stagger up from your sleeping mat as the light creeps through the slits in the wall. Your back aches from the canal, your arms ache from the field, and your soul aches from the knowledge that it's all waiting again today. You wonder if anyone has ever slept through an entire season. Maybe that's what priests do, or cat. There's no time for hangovers. Your wife hands you a clay cup of water, muttering something about, if you can drink like a noble, you can work like one too. Fair enough. You drink. Today is different though. You're not heading straight to the fields. Today, you're assigned to irrigation repair. Specifically, canal wall fortification. That special brand of peasant suffering that combines heavy lifting, foul water, biting insects, and the distinct joy of hauling wet mud uphill. You trudge down the familiar path with a few others, Didu among them, looking just as miserable as you feel. Whose idea was this again? He groans. Probably the gods, you say. They hate us. The irrigation canal is a mess. Overnight, part of the embankment caved in. Water trickles the wrong way, pooling in spots and leaving some nearby fields bone dry. You can already hear the overseer shouting from somewhere, as if volume alone can plug the breach. You drop your tools beside a growing pile of sun-baked mud bricks. Your job is to dig, fill, and stack, over and over. The bricks are handmade of Nile silt, chopped straw, and crushed dung. You know this because you helped make them last week. And yes, your hands still smell faintly of dung. You get to work. Shovel mud, slap it into the gaps, pack it tight, smooth it down. Next brick. Repeat. The sun climbs. Your skin burns. Flies buzz near your ears, ignoring your swats like they own the place. You're assigned to bucket hauling duty for a while refilling the supply of water for mixing. This means lugging to clay jugs back and forth from the canal to the mixing pit. They're heavy, they're slippery, and by the fourth trip, you seriously consider trading one of your children for a donkey. The others aren't doing much better. One man curses as he drops a whole stack of bricks into the canal. Another scrapes his arm open on a splintered tool handle and wraps it in a strip of his own kilt. No complaints. Somewhere during your 8th round of hauling, you spot movement at the far edge of the field. 3 men in crisp linen robes stand beneath a parasol, their heads shaded, their sandals spotless. Temple officials, maybe even land surveyors. They're inspecting, of course. One of them lifts a tablet and scribbles something with a reed stylus. Another points at a section of wall you haven't even touched yet, and frowns. The third sips from a polished jar. It's always amazing how well people can critique work they'll never do. Dudu mutters beside you. Think if I wrap my head in linen and scowl, I can do their job. You'd get sunstroke before breakfast. Worth it. The overseer approaches the officials, bowing so low you expect him to fold in half. They speak in hushed tones. You can't hear what's being said, but you can see the gestures at the wall, at your crew, probably something about your work rate and mud efficiency. Historians still argue whether these inspections were about genuine engineering supervision or just excuses to collect more taxes. You've made your decision. After they leave, morale sinks. Everyone works slower, angrier, resentful of how easily the robes glide across the field while your own feet are caked in sludge. You grab another bucket, slosh, repeat. The makeshift wooden support beam gives way with a sharp crack. A section of the canal wall collapses again, sending mud, water, and 3 very unlucky peasants tumbling into the sludge. You hear shouting, splashing, and a wet, theatrical splat. You rush over. One man emerges coughing and furious. Another has lost a sandal. The third is laughing hysterically. It's a bath, he shouts. A free bath. The gods do love us. Everyone chuckles in spite of themselves. Even you. The mud has completely ruined the repaired wall, but the moment is so absurd, so ridiculous, that no one can stay mad for long. You fish out the missing sandal. It somehow managed to wedge itself under a floating frog. Eventually, the wall is rebuilt again. Stronger this time. More twine, better brick placement, and maybe a small prayer hidden inside one of the support beams. Superstition is free, after all. As the sun begins its descent, you sit beside the canal, legs dangling into the cool water. Du sits beside you, chewing a sliver of dried fish. You think anyone important will ever know we did this? He asks. No. He nods. Yeah. Me neither. But you both know the truth. If the canals fail, Egypt fails. No grain, no bread, no Pharaoh's taxes, no feasts for the gods, no golden tombs. You are the mud under the marble, the sweat beneath the splendor, unseen, but essential. As you walk back toward the village, you notice the water is finally flowing evenly. The crops will get their drink. The overseer won't yell tomorrow. The gods might even leave you alone for a day. That's a win. And in this life, wins are rare and muddy. You reach your doorstep just as the sky turns the color of old papyrus faded blue, washed with streaks of orange and violet. The village hums with its evening rhythm. Kids chase one another between huts. Chickens flap up to roost on low walls. And someone's trying to fix a broken pot with more hope than technique. The smell of roasting leeks and boiling lentils wraps around you like a familiar old tunic. You step inside your home and are immediately greeted by the chaotic symphony of domestic life. Your wife is wrestling the goat. Again, Mena has chewed a hole through the grain sack and somehow tangled herself in the reed curtain. Your eldest is trying to light the cook fire using a sparkstone and swearing under his breath. Your daughter is stomping around with a face like a storm cloud, because her spinning spindle broke again. And the baby is chewing on a broken reed, and looks way too happy about it. You put down your hoe and sigh. Home sweet. Moderately tolerable chaos. You don't sit down. Not yet. There's work to do. You kneel by the wall and inspect the patch you made yesterday. Still holding. You mutter a quiet thanks to whichever local spirit or insect is keeping it from crumbling again. You adjust the sleeping mats, shake out the straw, and double-check the jars of dried grain stacked in the corner. Only to have cracks this time. Improvement. Then comes the weaving. Your wife hands you a bundle of raw flax fibers, and you begin to twist them into thread. It's not glamorous, but it's part of life. You spin while your wife works the loom, her fingers dancing across the warp like they were born to it. The fabric isn't fancy rough linen, plain and beige, but if you can finish enough of it this week, you can trade for dried fish, or maybe even one of those fancy blue amulets sold at the market. The kind the priests claim wards off coughing and curses. You suspect it mostly wards off money from your pouch. You're halfway through a twist when your daughter sits beside you with a broken spindle. It snapped again. You glanced at it. It's the cheap kind bone and clay, not wood. Try mine. You offer. It's older than you. She takes it cautiously, as if it might bite. You guide her hand through the first spin. She frowns with concentration, then the thread holds. She grins. You feel 10 years younger for that smile. Behind you, your son shouts triumphantly. Fire! Actual flame, dancing atop the tinder pile. He's delighted. You, of course, are delighted that he didn't accidentally burn the house down this time. Dinner is meager, but warm. Lentils, again, flavored with wild herbs, and just a hint of sourness. A gift from fermentation ore. Your wife adds a few dried figs to the mix, and everyone eats in silence, save for the baby slapping the side of a jug with rhythmic glee. Afterward, you help your son haul a jar of water to the neighbors. Their well has run dry. You hand them the jar with a nod. No words needed. Tomorrow, they'll return the favor with bread or onions, or maybe just a whispered blessing. It's how things work. You come back and finally sit. Really sit. The kind of sit where your spine gives a little thank you, and your legs feel like soft clay. The kids are already curled up on the mat. Your wife braids her hair by oil lamp light, her movements practiced and silent. You stare at the ceiling. The palm thatch roof is full of tiny gaps, letting in slices of the night sky. You spot a star, or maybe it's just a firefly stuck in a cobweb. Hard to say. Then comes the scratching. Your wife hears it too. Oh no, she grunts. You both scramble to the grain jars. A rat, one of the sneaky ones. You grab a stick. She grabs a broom, and the next 3 minutes of pure chaos. Dust clouds, shouted curses. Her jar gets knocked over, and the baby somehow starts laughing mid-dream. Finally, you chase the rat outside, flinging your stick after it like a javelin. It misses dramatically. You stand outside panting, triumphant and irritated. From next door, a voice calls out, "Victory." For now, you call back. You step back in, shut the door, and immediately trip over the goat. Mena looks up like this is her house now and you're just visiting. After tidying up the wreckage and you settle back into your spot. It's late. The lamp is burning low. Your wife curls beside the children, one arm draped over them like a protective net. You hear distant drums, not threatening, one celebratory. Somewhere across the fields, a birth maybe, or a wedding. You imagine lanterns bobbing like fireflies, dancers moving in slow circles, someone playing a stringed lyre. You used to dance, before your knees turn into dry twigs. Now you just tap your foot and hum. The door creaks open again. Did you, of course. "Come on," he says. "One round at the beer hut." "No," you say. "My bones will mutiny." He shrugs. "Suit yourself, but you'll miss the gossip." You laugh. "I'll survive." He disappears into the night, and you lie back once more. Tomorrow, the canal will need checking. The walls will need reinforcing. Someone will shout. Someone will fall into the mud. The overseer will grumble. The taxman might show up, but not tonight. Tonight is for rest. A breeze slips through the roof, cool and soft. The baby hiccups in its sleep. Your wife snores once and then murmurs something about leaks. You close your eyes, the warmth of the day slowly seeping from your limbs. Not gone, borrowed, and the stars wither fire, or god farts, or flying boats twinkle through the cracks. You wake up with a sore neck and a bit of straw embedded in your cheek. Somehow, despite everything, you slept, or at least something close to it, more like a nap that got out of hand. You sit up slowly, joints creaking like old wooden shutters. A glance around tells you you're the first awake. For once, the lamp has gone out. The baby is snoring softly. Mena the goat is curled up in the doorway like a dozing guardian, chewing something that was probably once useful. You step outside into the cool, early dawn. The village is quiet, no shouting, no barking, no clanging of pots yet. Just birds, breeze, and the distant rustle of reeds. It won't last. You have only one thing on your mind this morning. The beer hut. Not for beer this time, for news. Word's been buzzing all week. Someone found something near the necropolis. A statue, or a gold ring, or a priest's skeleton sitting in a chair, still holding a cup. The story keeps changing, but the result is always the same. Excitement. And whenever there's excitement, there's gossip. You hurried through your chores, patch a leak in the water jar, chase a lizard out of the grain, tie up Minahand, make your way to the hut. Just as the sun begins to peek over the palm trees, the beer hut is already half full. Not with drinkers, but with talkers. Did you waves you over. You're late, he says. You missed the part about the mummy with 2 heads. You sit beside him, rubbing your eyes. 2 heads, or 2 masks, he says with a shrug. Hard to tell. By the 3rd retelling, it was breathing fire. The hut buzzes like a hive. Men and women sit around clay pots, sipping beer thick enough to chew. It's barely past sunrise. But who's counting? You sip too. Just a little, enough to feel awake. The gossip flows. A tomb door broken open. Gold leaf everywhere. Someone saw a crocodile guarding it. Know a woman with crocodile eyes. You roll your eyes. So, a crocodile. Everyone laughs. But then, someone new enters the hut. Not a regular. He's wearing travel robes, dusty and torn. A small caravan tag dangles from his belt, the kind traders carry. He walks with a slight limp and a crooked smile. Juju raises his eyebrows. Well, stranger, what news do you bring? The man sets down his bag and pulls out a lump. No, not a lump. A brick, a perfectly shaped, perfectly dry mud brick with the royal cartouche stamped deep into its face. Temple property. Someone whispers. The man just grins. They're building again. You feel it before he even says it, the familiar churn in your gut. Pharaoh's temple is expanding. Again. Whenever Pharaoh builds, peasants suffer. That's the law of nature. You ask, softly, where? South of the canal bend, the man replies. Past the floodplain, a new granary, and maybe a tomb. A hush falls. Tombs mean labor. Tombs mean hauling. Tombs mean you might be pulled from your fields and reassigned weeks, even months, of labor, far from your village, your family, your already shaky life. And the worst part, you won't even be paid. Not in anything real. Maybe some dried fish. Maybe a chunk of salt. Maybe a little linen. And, of course, the overseer's favorite currency. Historians still argue whether state labor in ancient Egypt was national service or forced servitude with extra sand. You know, which it feels like. The beer tastes a little more bitter now. The hut a little warmer. Someone mutters, they'll be here soon. Everyone nods. You head back home with a heaviness in your chest. Along the way, you pass the shrine of Taweret, the goddess of childbirth and domestic safety. You pause to touch the carved belly of her Hippolytan form, not out of superstition. Back at home, your wife already knows. She always knows. She's kneeling by the cookpot, stirring with short, efficient strokes. They're building again. You nod. She sighs, sets the ladle down, and wipes her hands on her kilt. Who's going? Don't know yet. She doesn't reply. Later that day, the priest shows up. Of course, it's a priest, not an overseer, not a scribe, not a royal messenger. No, when Pharaoh needs bodies, he sends a man in spotless linen, smelling of incense, with a voice like oiled bronze. He gathers the men near the village center, unrolls a list, and begins to read. Names. Yours isn't on it. Not yet. But Dedus, he doesn't react much, just spits in the dust and says, told you I should have pretended to be a priest's cousin. You offer to help him pack. He declines. What's there to pack? A jug and a pair of sandals. Still, you hand him a packet of dried dates. He looks at you, then says, if I die lifting stones, tell my wife I lied about the chicken. It was me. You both laugh. That kind of laugh that tastes like tears but never quite gets there. As the sun begins to set, the priest finishes his list and leaves with the chosen men. Their wives trail behind, carrying bundles. The children follow at a distance, confused, not yet understanding what it means to help Pharaoh. Your wife says, next time, it'll be you. You nod. Next time, you tuck your kids in with quiet words and cover their feet with an extra cloth. It's not cold, but it feels like the right thing to do. Tonight, the beer hut is quiet. Tonight, the stars seem dimmer. And tonight, you don't joke about tomb snakes or mummy masks. You just sit on the roof, beside your wife, watching the torches fade into the dark. You wake to drums. Not war drums, not that kind of story. These are festival drums, which is both better and somehow worse. Better, because no one's dying. Worse, because it means mandatory celebration. And in Egypt, that's serious business. Today is a festival day. The gods demand joy. And by the Nile, they will have it even if it has to be squeezed out of tired peasants like juice from overripe figs. You sit up groggily, already feeling the weight of it. You were hoping for a quiet day, maybe fixing the roof, tending the beans, carving a fishhook. But no, the priest has spoken, and the whole village is summoned to the temple of why? Because it's the season of flood, and Sobek likes to be flattered when his crocodile-infested river is about to swallow half the farmland. Flattery, after all, is cheaper than building real. Your wife is already up, braiding the children's hair and muttering about how you'd better not embarrass the family like last year. You try to protest. You didn't trip over the offering bowl. The goat did budge. She's already moved on to dusting soot off the family's best linen sash. It's barely whiter than sand, but it'll do. You quickly wash just a splash and try to flatten your hair. It doesn't help. You still look like someone who got in a fight with a reed mat and lost. The village path is lined with people moving in the same direction toward the temple. The children are giddy. The older folk look like they've chewed too many sour figs. You and Didu walk together, dressed in your formal kilts. Didu has tied a strip of blue-dyed linen around his forehead like a festival headband. He looks absurd. You don't tell him. You're too distracted by the line of temple guards keeping people in order. At the temple, things are already in motion. Musicians play flutes and lutes. Dancers whirl in circles, and priests in tall white headdresses chant in rhythms older than the bricks beneath their feet. Someone throws flower petals into the crowd. They hit you in the eye. A good omen, apparently. You're ushered into Roseman on one side, women and children on the other end told to sing along with the chants. The problem is, no one actually remembers the words. Everyone just hums and mumbles with vague conviction. Then comes the parade. A golden statue of Sobek, god of strength and fertility, is carried out by 6 oiled men in shimmering skirts. Sobek's crocodile head gleams under the sun, crowned with feathers and incense smoke. Behind it, junior priests toss out palm fronds and little amulets carved from faience, cheap, brittle, and extremely valuable if you're superstitious. You pretend not to care, but you still catch one midair and stuff it into your sash. Your stomach growls. Festivals come with rituals and sometimes food. But first, more performance. The high priest begins a dramatic retelling of how Sobek fought a giant snake in the sky and swallowed the moon, only to regurgitate it 3 days later as a sign of rebirth. It's loud, sweaty, and entirely one-sided. Your mind drifts. You look over at the nobles standing near the shrine. They wear wigs and perfume, their skin smooth and unblistered. One of them fans herself with an ostrich plume. Another chews on dates from a silver dish. You can smell the wine from here. You elbow Didu. I want to be reincarnated as that guy's dog. He nods. Even his dog probably gets better beer. The priest calls for silence, then announces that the temple will now bless the village with sacred bread, which turns out to be stale barley loaves, passed hand to hand, each chunk smaller than your palm. Still, you eat it. Even divine crumbs are better than none. And now comes the real reason everyone is here. Tribute offerings. Yes, Sobek must be praised with song and flower and payment. It's not enough to worship the god, you have to feed his priests too. You're ushered forward with your neighbors to place your voluntary offerings at the altar: onions, dried fish, a small clay jar of oil. Someone in line in front of you offers a single copper ring. The priest accepts it with a forced smile that says, "You could have tried harder." Your turn comes. You place your contribution in a woven basket of flax thread, freshly spun from your wife's hands. The priest inspects it, nods, and sets it aside. You accept. No public shaming. A victory. But just as you're stepping away, he pauses. "You didn't sing?" he says. You blink. "I did. Not loud enough," he replies. You consider arguing, but there are gods nearby and a distinct shortage of forgiveness in that priest's expression. So you do what anyone would do. You sing loudly, off-key. A song about Sobek's glistening scales and mighty jaws, and something about him blessing your goat's womb. People laugh. Even the priest cracks a smile. Barely. You are permitted to leave. Back outside, you regroup with your family. Your daughter tugs your sleeve. "That song was terrible." "Thank you," you say. "I made it myself." You wander the temple grounds, eating what scraps are passed around: dates, radish slices, bits of honey cake if you're lucky. Your kids run around with other kids, playing catch the scarab, a game involving pebbles, yelling, And absolutely no scarabs. There's dancing, and music, and stories retold, under shady trees. An old man tells your son that if you drink Nile water during the flood and don't get sick, you're destined for greatness. Your son immediately tries to run to the river. You intercept him just in time. Let's wait until after dinner, you say. As the sun begins to lower, the mood softens. The priests return to the inner sanctum. The statue of Sebek is carried back to its shadowy chamber, its gold gleam vanishing behind a curtain of incense. People begin to drift home, slower now, weighed down by food, sun, and the faint knowledge that work returns tomorrow. Your wife looks up at you. Well, what? You survived. Barely. She smirks. You'll live. That night, as your family settles in under the patched roof and faded stars, you think about gods in gold, about crocodile-shaped statues and perfume-drenched nobles, about your song echoing in the temple air, and you wonder, does Sobek actually listen? Or does he just like the smell of onions? The next morning arrives in silenza rare, unsettling kind. No drums, no shouting, no temple summons, just the creak of reed mats, the low moan of the wind through the village alley, and a goat farts so loud it startles two birds off the roof. You sit up slowly, muscles stiff, voice raspy. Sobek festivals have a way of lingering, especially when you sang about goat wombs in front of half the village. You think today might actually be normal. That's your first mistake. By mid-morning, word spreads like fire through a thatched roof. Someone is sick. Badly sick. It starts with one house, then two. You hear it whispered in the beer hut, shouted by water jugs, mumbled by kids who don't fully understand it yet. People are coughing, shaking, burning up. Your wife sends you to check on your neighbor, old Maku. You find him curled on a mat, his skin pale, his lips cracked, and a smell in the air you can't describe without gagging. He tries to wave you off. Just ate something bad, he says. Maybe the duck wasn't dead yet. You know better. Everyone does. The local healer is summoned. She's older than stone and twice as brittle. Her back is shaped like a sickle, and her eyes are cloudy with time, but when she speaks, people listen. She arrives with a pouch full of powders and a belt of dried things you can't name. Some of them might be frogs. One of them definitely is a frog. She examines Miku, sniffs him, pokes his feet, whispers something in his ear, and finally says, "Fever curse." Everyone gasps. You don't. You're trying to remember if you also ate the duck. She prescribes a mixture of pounded garlic, river clay, anti-escrooched, lizard bones. Apply it to the soles of the feet, and whisper the hymn of Ra 3 times. Someone asks if that's before or after the goat dung compress. Depends on the phase of the moon, she says. Of course it does. You helped mix the potion, and it smells like death and hope had an argument in a mud jar. Miku accepts it without flinching. He's seen worse. He's smelled worse. Back outside, people gather in nervous knots. Some wear charms around their necks. Others burn herbs at their doorways. One woman ties reeds into a circle and places it on her roof a ward against spirits. She says, "A man near the granary swears he saw a ghost last night. It told him to stop borrowing lentils without asking." Historians still argue whether these ancient healing rituals had real medicinal value or were just elaborate ways of saying, "We have no idea what we're doing, but let's at least look busy." You return home and find your wife scrubbing the children's hands with vinegar water. "Don't drink anything from the canal," she warns. You weren't planning to. You saw a dead goat floating in it yesterday. By midday, the village has gone tense. Quiet. No one lingers outside. No one shares food. Even the beer hut is half empty. But the healer isn't done. She visits your house next, not because you're sick, but because you're close to someone who is. She insists on checking everyone. Your wife submits calmly. Your children giggle. The baby sneezes directly into her face. She does not flinch. "You're healthy," she says. Finally, you exhale. But the air is wrong. You inhale again. Very cautiously, she pulls out a bundle of dried herbs, sets them on fire, and waves the smoke around the room, muttering something in old tongue. It sounds like threats, but you're not fluent. "Keep the goat outside," she warns as she leaves. You do not ask why. You just move Mena to the courtyard and toss her a fig. She responds by chewing on the wall. As evening falls, you sit with Didu near the canal. He looks grim. 3 more sick, he says. You nod. Temple hasn't sent anyone. You both look up toward the distant temple spire, shimmering faintly in the evening sun. No messengers, no scribes, no priestly concern, just silence. "I heard they're quarantining us," Didu mutters. Not officially, but they're keeping their distance. He's probably right. That's how things go. Peasants are replaceable. Priests are not. Gods forbid the man who chants the sun awake every morning catches something mortal. You throw a pebble into the water. It plunks softly. You spend the evening mixing a poultice from what the healer left you: honey, garlic, ground mustard seeds. It's meant to draw out the fire, she said. You're not sure if she meant the fever or your soul. Either way, the smell is punishing. You smear some on the children's feet, just in case. Your daughter complains loudly. Your son says it tickles. The baby bites your finger. Your wife lights an extra oil lamp and hangs a charm above the doorway, a tiny crocodile carved from palm wood. Protection? Or maybe just because he's the loudest god and might actually do something. You lie down later, not really sleepy, and watch the shadows crawl across the ceiling. Outside, a dog howls once, then silence. Then the sound of someone coughing, deep and hoarse, from 3 huts away. You close your eyes. You're not sick. Not yet. And maybe that's enough. The sickness doesn't leave. It lingers like smoke, drifting from house to house, seeping through cracks, settling into lungs and bellies and bones. You wake each day with a question pounding inside your skull before your eyes even open. Who is sick now? Who didn't make it through the night? By the 4th day, the priest still hasn't returned. Neither has the temple scribe. The healer's visits are less frequent now, not because she's unwilling, but because she's exhausted. Even frogs have limits. And her belt of dried spells is looking a little ... underpowered. Life continues, because it has to. You spend your morning helping bury a neighbor. Maku didn't make it. You help wrap him in linen thin rough. Not the fancy kind the embalmers would use, and place his amulet over his heart. His wife tucks a flatbread in his hand. Something for the journey, she says. You say nothing. You're too tired. By afternoon, the air is hot, thick, almost syrupy, but it carries something else. Drums, flutes, singing, not temple, chanting. This is louder. Didu finds you before you can ask. My cousin, he says, shrugging, said the fever took enough already. Might as well marry before it takes him too. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because he's right. Weddings wait for no plague. And so, before sunset, you find yourself at the edge of the canal where the celebration is already in full swing. Reeds are tied into crude garlands. Someone has painted symbols onto clay jugs using what looks suspiciously like berry mash. There are flowers, kind of. There's a table made of 2 crates stacked with linen, holding a bowl of honeyed nuts, a pitcher of beer, and amazingly a whole roasted duck. The bride arrives wearing more jewelry than clothing, most of it borrowed, none of it matching. Her veil is a fishnet. Literally, the groom looks like he just woke up in a grain bin, which he probably did. The priest, absent. Instead, the oldest man in the village stands on a rock and clears his throat. Do you two want this? They nod. He nods. Good, then kiss and sit down before the duck goes cold. Ceremony complete. You clap. Everyone claps. The music swells. And then the duck fight begins. You knew it was coming. You just didn't know who would start it. Turns out, it's a cousin of the groom who thinks the duck should have gone to his family because they brought the beer. The bride grabs the duck. Someone else grabs it too. There's a tug, a squawk, and suddenly there are feathers in the air and someone's shoe in the canal. You take a step back. 10 beads, says the bride wins. Dee whispers, you don't bet. You've seen her swing a broom. Sure enough, she knees her cousin in the shin, elbows the groom in the stomach, and walks off with the duck held high like a trophy. Applause. Peace is restored. The duck is shared. It's more of a scramble and terror affair. You manage to get a crispy wing. Your son gets something that may have once been a neck. Your daughter finds a wishbone and immediately tries to bend it. What do I wish for? She asks. You pause. No more duck fights, you say. She frowns. That's boring. Then wish for a goat that lays eggs. She grins. That's better. As the stars come out, the music gets louder. Someone plays a flute badly. Someone else tries to dance on a clay pot and falls. People cheer. Someone throws a sandal. It lands in a stew pot. You're handed a small jar of wine. You sip it carefully. It tastes like grapes. Yes, but mostly like thyme and dust and maybe a hint of frog. Still, it's warm, and your limbs relax for the first time in days. There's laughter again. Even in the face of sickness and loss, there is laughter. You're not sure if it's bravery or denial. Maybe both. But it keeps people standing. That night, you carry your daughter home. She fell asleep against your side. the wishbone still clutched in her fist. Your son trails behind you, sticky from figs and dug grease. Your wife leans into your shoulder, humming an old wedding song. You don't know the words. You hum anyway. Back in the hut, you lay the children down, brush straw from their cheeks, and collapse onto the mat with a groan. Minna, the goat, licks your toes. You kick her gently away. She huffs and settles down near the wall. Your wife lies beside you, tracing patterns on your arm with one finger. You looked happy, she says. At the wedding, you think for a moment, I forgot we were poor for about an hour. She chuckles. That's the magic of weddings. There's silence for a while. Not heavy, just soft, like the hush before a breeze. Do you think, she says slowly, that they'll be happy? You know who she means. You shrugged. If they survive the week, they'll have a better chance than most. She doesn't laugh. Neither do you. Outside, the stars blink gently overhead. The gods are quiet tonight, probably full of duck. You awake too, shouting. Not the usual kind, no temple summons, no goat disaster, no neighbor yelling about a stolen pot. This shout is sharp, high, and threaded with panic. You bolt upright and run outside, barefoot, your heart already racing. A small crowd has gathered at the edge of the village near the canal, and you push through, expecting the worst. It's your uncle, or rather, was your uncle. His body lies half submerged in the water, half covered by reeds. His arm is twisted awkwardly above his head. A sandal floats nearby, like it's unsure whether to stay or leave. His face is still, mouth slightly open. His eyes are mercifully closed. Dudu stands nearby, scratching his neck. He was heading to check the traps. He mutters, you know, he always thought hippos wouldn't mess with old bones. You feel sick. Your uncle was stubborn. Yesba. He knew the river like the back of his hand. He also thought wearing a crocodile tooth charm made you immune to most of life's dangers. That clearly didn't apply to hippos. Someone behind you says it's soft, respectful, and definitive. They'll take him to the Your stomach turns, but you nod. It's what's done. Egyptian law, religious law, social law, they all agree on one thing. Nobody should rot in the open, not unless you want angry gods and angrier jackals. Even peasants deserve the rights, or at least the cheapest version of them. You and two others lift him out of the water, wrap him in the spare reed mat someone brings, and carry him toward the embalmer's tent. It's a small building just outside the temple precinct. Not for nobles, that place is marble and shadows. This one is clay and flies. The embalmer is already waiting. He's a thin man with stained fingernails and the expression of someone who's seen too much and stopped caring around corpse number 30. Standard treatment. He asks, without looking up. You nod. No charms. No jars. Just rap. He scribbles something onto a tablet with red ink. Any possessions? You hand him the crocodile tooth amulet. He inspects it, pockets it, and says nothing. You're about to leave when the tax priest appears. Because of course, he does. Dressed in blinding white, smelling of myrrh and unearned authority. He arrives with two scribes in tow, and a look that says, I'm not here to help. He clears his throat. The deceased did. He owe grain. You blink. Grain? Yes. The priest replies. He worked the lower field quadrant. His tax share is due. He's dead, you say. The priest raises an eyebrow. Not an excuse. One of the scribes opens a scroll and begins reading out numbers. Yields, deficits, tribute values. It all sounds like nonsense, until you realize what they're getting at. They want you to pay it. He was your blood, the priest says smoothly. By tradition, the family absorbs any outstanding debt. By tradition, hippos don't care about debts, you mutter. He doesn't laugh. Neither does the hippo, presumably. Your wife joins you just in time to grab your wrist, before your fist meets the priest's overly lotioned face. She whispers, we'll give them the goat. You freeze. Mena. She nods once. It's her or the children's grain, and Mena can always eat someone else's laundry. You hate how reasonable that is. So you agree. The goat is led away by a scribe with too much perfume and not enough common sense. She fights the whole way, headbutting two of them and relieving herself on a priest's sandal. A small comfort. The embalmer promises your uncle's body will be well handled. You don't ask for details. You already know what that means. No canopic jars, no elaborate masks, just linen, resin, and a cheap wooden coffin. If he's lucky, the priest says a prayer in the direction of the setting sun. It's short. No one cries. Later that night, you sit with Didu under the palm tree near your house. staring at the patch of sky not yet swallowed by smoke from cook fires. Men is gone. You mutter. She headbutt the afterlife open for him. You both laugh. Then Dedu grows quiet. He told me once, your uncle, that he never wanted to be buried like a noble. Said he didn't trust fancy tombs. Said if your name's carved in stone, it just gives the gods a place to find you. You chuckle. And if it's not, then maybe you get some peace. You sipped from a cracked cup of date wine. It tastes bitter today. Someone nearby is telling a child the myth of Osiris and the dismembered body, how his wife Isis reassembled him, piece by piece, so he could become king of the dead. You always liked that story. Hopeful, in a morbid kind of way. But you doubt Isis is showing up for your uncle. Your wife appears beside you, sits without speaking, and leans her head on your shoulder. You know what she's thinking. That you're next. That any of you could be next. You don't have words to fix that. So you just sit there, staring at the stars, wondering if the gods noticed you at all or if they only keep track of those buried with gold. The next morning begins with something you haven't heard in days. Silence. Not the uneasy kind that follows a death, or the thick stillness of fevered homes. No, this is the rare kind calm. Gentle, laced with bird chirps and the slosh of river reeds. For a moment, it tricks you into believing everything is fine. Then you remember. You've been summoned, not by the priests this time, not by the overseer, by something worse. A recruiter. They arrived yesterday riding in a dusty chariot, no less flanked by temple guards and trailing a small caravan of scribe assistants. Their mission, conscript laborers for a state project. A big one. Word spread quickly. Pharaoh is expanding the granary complex near the river's bend, maybe even laying foundation stones for a new ceremonial tomb. No one knows for sure, but the result is some able-bodied men are being invited to join. And by invited, of course, they mean ordered. You are one of them. Your wife doesn't argue. She just packs you a bundle of dried figs, stale barley cakes, a clay jar of salted radish. Don't trade this for beer, she says, not joking. Your son asks if you'll build a pyramid. Not today, you reply. Tomorrow. Still no. He seems disappointed. At the village edge, others have gathered. Dedu is among them. His expression says, what you're thinking? Here we go again. You're grouped into teams and given chisels, baskets, and those flat wooden sleds used for dragging stone. At least it didn't laugh at you when you tripped over it. The worksite is 3 miles away. You walk in the heat, kicking up dust and stepping around dung and dry beetles. When you arrive, it hits you all at once, the scale of it. Dozens of workers already move like ants over a partially dug foundation. The air is thick with shouted orders, clanking tools, and the low groan of stone against wood. Mud bricks are stacked in massive, uneven pyramids. Ramps of compacted sand lead down into trenches deep enough to lose a donkey. A supervisor, tall, polished Sundar, greets you with a bored expression. He doesn't introduce himself. He just points. You get assigned to the hauling crew. Naturally, your job, drag stone blocks from the quarry edge down the ramp to the masons, who chip them into shape with slow, deliberate swings. It takes 8 of you to move 1 block. 9, if Dedu's counting. Could be worse, he mutters. Could be pushing dung carts. An hour in, you kinda wish you were. The work is brutal. You tie thick ropes around your shoulders, lean forward, and pull like your life depends on it, which, to be fair, it might. The blocks grind across the sleds, squealing like pigs. Sand flies into your face. Sweat stings your eyes. Your feet burn inside your sandals. You take a break. Finally, under the shade of a half-finished wall, a mason nearby hums a song while carving a lotus shape into the corner of a brick. He's missing 3 fingers. You lose those on a pyramid? Dedu asks him. No. The man replies. Wife bit him off during a fight. You're not sure if he's serious. You eat your barley cake in silence. At some point, a government official walks by. He's young and wears a tunic so white it practically shouts, I've never lifted anything heavier than a scroll. He observes your crew, writes something on a tablet, and nods once before moving on. What's he even doing here? Someone mutters. Recording your laziness, another replies. Historians still argue whether these state labor records were used to manage efficiency, or just to justify bigger tax quotas later. You have your suspicions. You go back to hauling. The next block feels heavier than the last, though it's probably the same size. Every stone is identical when your muscles are screaming. A man from another team collapses. The supervisor drags him off the path and tells someone to get his basket. You don't see him again. By mid-afternoon, the sun turns vicious. No clouds, no breeze. The work slows. Tempers fray. One man throws his rope down and shouts, "The gods cannot want this." Everyone pretends they didn't hear, because the gods might be listening. Eventually, a horn blows. The day's labor is done. You drop your rope, stretch your back, and instantly regret it. The crew disperses toward the makeshift camp nearby rows of red shelters, a cooking pit, and one very overworked water jug. You sit in the dust, drink water that tastes like it's been filtered through someone's sandal, and watch the sun dip behind a dune. Dedu lies beside you, staring at the sky. You ever wonder, he says, what it's like to be Pharaoh? You grunt. Padded sandals, unlimited figs, a private flute player for your goat. He laughs, then he grows quiet. Do you think they dream about us? Pharaohs, he nods. No, you say, but we build their dreams anyway. You lie there for a while, the sand cooling beneath you, your fingers blistered, your bones humming with pain. You dream of mud, of golden statues, of lifting a stone so heavy it presses you into the earth. You dream of home, of your son's questions, of your wife's calloused hands, and somewhere, in the back of your mind, a whisper, you are the foundation. But no one ever names the bricks. You return home 3 days later, dragging your feet and carrying absolutely nothing except for an empty pouch, 2 new blisters, and the distinct smell of crushed limestone and dried sweat. The village greets you not with cheers, but with the familiar indifference of people too tired to be surprised anymore. Someone waves from a rooftop. A child chucks a fig at a chicken and misses both. Business as usual. Your wife meets you at the doorway with a nod that means, "I'm glad you're not dead. Now wash your hands before touching the baby." You do. Inside, it's peaceful, which, in your home, means no one is yelling, nothing is on fire, and Mena hasn't eaten anything important in at least an hour. Your daughter spins thread by the door. Your son is scribbling something into the dust with a stick. You look closer. It's symbols, not just doodles, but shapes, lines, birds, squiggles. At first, you think he's just copying graffiti from a temple wall, like every curious village kid eventually does. But then he says it. That one means bread, and that one's man. You blink. Where'd you learn that? He grins. Cousin Mary. He's learning with the temple boys. He said, I could watch you squat beside him. You can read. He shrugs. A little. Not the priest stuff. Just words. You stare at the crude hieroglyphs. They're rough, clumsy, and spaced like a goat's hoof marks, but they're words. Your son, the same boy who once tried to drink river water to become a goddess, now making language out of symbols. It stirs something inside you. Pride, fear, a strange ache. You don't know how to name. Why do the temple boys get to learn all this? Your daughter asks, why not us? Because someone has to write down what the gods say. You reply, too quickly. Your wife snorts. And someone has to plant onions. So the gods have lunch. You smirk. She's not wrong. The truth, of course, is more complicated. In Egypt, scribes are power. They carry no hoes, but they control the grain tallies. They fight no wars, but they draft the treaties. Their hands are soft, but their names are carved into stone. Historians still debate whether literacy in ancient Egypt was reserved for the elite, purely for control, or simply because schooling was too expensive to scale. You don't care. You just know your son drew bread and man into the dirt, and you wonder what that means for him. That evening, you ask Mary about the temple school. He shrugs. It's boring. They hit you with reeds when you mess up. Sounds about right, but you get to sit under a roof. He adds, okay, that does sound appealing. You asked what it would take to get your son into the school. He hesitates. Well, usually, only sons of scribes or temple workers get in, or if you bribe someone, or if the boy is clever. He is. I mean very clever. You sigh. That night, you talk to your wife while the children sleep. He's got something. You say. He's got the look. She nods. So did your uncle. He still got eaten by a hippo. Fair. But this is different. You both know it. Maybe he could. Right. For Pharaoh, you say. Not carry stones. Not dig canals. Or maybe he'll just end up scribbling tallies for a barley merchant. You smile. Still better than bartering with goat dung. The next day, your son keeps practicing. You watch from the doorway as he traces a line of glyphs into the soft mud with a stick. A bird, a loaf, a sun. He messes one up, wipes it out, and starts again. There's a fire in him. Not the fever kind. the hunger kind. Later that week, he draws a crude version of your name. You tear up a little and blame it on the dust. Your daughter watches, unimpressed. Can he draw me next? He's not drawing. You say, he's writing. What's the difference? You think about it, then say, one gets you yelled at by priests, the other gets you paid. She nods, like that makes perfect sense. That night, you ask your wife if they still sell papyrus scraps at the shrine market. She sighs. Only the ugly sheets. The ones with creases and wormholes. Perfect. You say you won't mind. And so begins the next quiet rebellion. You take on extra canal duty. She spins extra thread. Together, you scrape enough to buy 2 scraps of papyrus and a used ink. Your son holds them like treasure, like magic, like proof that something different might be possible. The baby tries to eat one. Everyone screams. He laughs. Chaos resumes. But for a moment, you'd see it a future that doesn't involve rope burns and grain taxes. A boy, hunched over a tablet, translating the whispers of kings. And somewhere, in the back of your mind, a new whisper. The gods may not remember your name, but he will write it. You're jolted awake by a sharp knock and the unmistakable sound of shouting. Not your name this time. Thank the gods. Just noise panicked. Low. A mix of commands and curses. You rise, grab your stick, and step outside. It's the granary. Again. This time, someone tried to break in. You join the small crowd forming near the gates. The guards are pacing, nervous, waving torches, poking through footprints in the dust. There's no real demi, just a broken latch and some scattered barley. Nothing taken, as far as anyone can tell. But still, someone tried. And now, it's your turn to stand watch. It's not exactly punishment. More like village duty. Everyone rotates in. But tonight feels different. Tense. Heavy. You kiss your wife's forehead, grab a torch, and head to the granary wall. It's a tall, curved structure with thick plastered bricks, stacked higher than most village homes. You settle in on a flat rooftop, nearby your post for the night wear. It's just you, a flickering torch, and the shadows. You listen. Owls, crickets, the distant bark of a dog, then silence. You shift on your mat. You left your softest one at home. This one is old cracked, reads in regret. You wish you had brought a stool, or better yet, a second you. One to do the guarding while the real you got some sleep. You think about last week's story, the one about a thief who broke into a noble's house and was cursed to speak in Beatles sounds for the rest of his life. You chuckle under your breath, then immediately regret it. Noise travels. You scan the tree line. Nothing. Then, something. Movement. Just a rustle. Could be a rat. Could be a jackal. Could be no. Just a bush. A very dramatic bush. You breathe again. To stay awake, you hum one of the old field songs, the ones people sing when planting milk. Your father used to hum it while carrying baskets. Now you sing it with cracked lips and dry eyes, hoping the gods of grain will forgive your off-key chorus. Hours pass. The torch sputters low. You'd think about everything. Your son and his strange hunger for symbols. Your daughter who wants to ride a crocodile. Your wife who keeps you alive with stubbornness and pickled radishes. You think about Didu How. He says his dreams have started repeating. Always the same. Endless bricks. Endless ramps. Endless sweat. You think about the stone you hauled last week, and how your back hasn't felt right since. And how the scribe barely looked up from his scroll. While you pushed it past him, historians still argue whether night watch duty was a respected role in ancient Egypt, or just a way to keep poor people too tired to rebel. You know how it feels. Sodomia thud. You leap to your feet. Stick raised, eyes scanning. Thereby the Westweller figure. Slender, fast, too tall to be a child. Moving low to the ground, like a jackal but quieter. You don't shout? Not yet. You creep closer. Steps, light. Ears pounding, then crush. A clay jar hits the ground. The figure bolts. You shout now, loud, sharp thief. The guards come running. The figure ducks behind the wall, disappears into the dark. You lose them near the riverbank. You return panting, furious, empty hand. Back at the granary, the guards are inspecting the damage. Just one jar broken, no grain missing. Again, it's not about stealing. It's about trying. You sit back on your mat, your legs trembling. Adrenaline drained fast when there's nothing to swing at. Dawn begins to pull its golden threads across the sky. You're relieved at sunrise. The day shift takes over. Still yawning. Back home, you're met with sleepy grunts and the smell of old lentils. Your wife is already up. You catch them. No, then at least tell me you didn't fall asleep. You glare. Only for 1 minute. Maybe 2. Very alert, sleeping. She smirks. Go, rinse your face. You do. Later that day, while resting your head against the sun-warmed bricks, your son climbs up beside you with a question. Why do we have to guard food if it's supposed to be shared? You glance at him. Who told you it's supposed to be shared? He frowns. The temple wall. It says the gods give grain to all. You chuckle? They do. Then the scribes take it. He doesn't laugh. Instead, he says, I think I want to write laws someday. You blink. Laws? Yes. So people don't have to steal. You ruffle his hair. That's nobo. He nods. Do nobos write laws? Some do. Then I want to be that kind of noble. You lie back and watch the clouds shift lazily over the Nile. You want to tell him the truth, ad noble or not. There's always someone guarding the granary. But instead, you say, then you'd better keep practicing. He smiles. And somewhere, a clay jar breaks in the distance. You're in the field again. Not because someone told you to be there, not this time, but because the harvest is close and your hands can't help themselves. The grain's almost ripe. The stalks tall and golden, bending under the weight of what you hope is a good year. You run your fingers along them as you walk, feeling their brush against your palms. It's quiet here. The kind of quiet you used to crave before your days got filled with stone hauling, fever burials, temple parades, and surprise duck fights. Now, you're just a man in a field, hoping the gods are in a good mood. You sit beneath a fig tree and let your body go heavy, like your bones are settling into the earth. You pull a chunk of barley cake from your pouch. It's dry as the desert floor, but oddly comforting. The breeze carries the smell of the Nile. And something else. Ash. You look toward the village. A thin trail of smoke rises over the rooftops. Nothing alarming, just a cook fire. But still, your heart kicks up like it always does now. Ever since the fever, you told yourself you were done expecting disaster. Then your daughter runs up, panting. Come quick! They're back! You don't ask who. You already know. You follow her back to the village center, where a group of men in dust-covered tunics stands flanked by temple guards. Behind them, a covered cart. One of the guards unrolls a scroll. The Pharaoh, he declares, has decreed the selection of tribute workers for the Festival of Renewal. Another project, another tomb, another list. The names are read aloud, one after the other. You're not on it, but Didu is he. Again, you find him later, sitting on the steps of the beer hut, not drinking, not even pretending to be cheerful. I told my wife, he says, if I die hauling limestone this time, I want to be buried in a basket. Cheap, fast, preferably near a fig tree. You laugh, but it catches in your throat. Want me to send you something? You ask. Yeah, he says. Send me your son's scribbles. If I can't come back, at least he can put my name in a story. Later that day, your boy draws a picture in the dust. It's Didu, rounder than usual, holding a duck, smiling. You take a deep breath and let it out slow. You don't stop the guards. You don't protest. No one does. You just watch the cart pull away, wheels squeaking under the weight of future monuments. Your daughter climbs into your lap as the sun sets. Why do they always take the strong ones? She asks. Because the gods need buildings. You say. She frowns. Then they should build their own. You nod. They probably used to, but then they met us. That night, your wife places a small bundle under your sleeping mat. A reed scroll, half full of your son's practice glyphs. Neat, careful, smudged in the corners. She says, he wants to write stories, not just words. You smile. What kind? He said. Ones where poor people get rich, and no one dies. You pull the scroll out and run your fingers over the ink. The symbols dance in the fire like cranes and jars, loaves and eyes, suns and thrones. A whole world waiting to be spoken. You kiss her forehead. The house is warm. The goat is asleep. No one's sick. You settle onto the mat and feel the straw cradle your body. You've done your share of hauling, of planting, of scraping by. And maybe, just maybe, the next generation will do more than survive. They'll write. They'll remember. They'll change things. And tonight, under the flicker of your dying oil lamp, that hope is enough. The wind outside your home rustles through the reeds with a soft sigh, like the Nile itself exhaling after a long day. You're lying still now, back warm against the packed earth floor, arms resting gently at your sides. The fire has burned low, casting soft golden shadows that dance across the wall. Slow and sleepy, your wife is already dreaming. You can hear her breath, deep, steady, peaceful. The children are curled together like puppies, their faces relaxed, mouths slightly open, limbs draped over one another like woven thread. Even Mena, that chaotic goat of yours, is finally quiet, snoring softly near the door. You close your eyes. The day is over. The fields will still be there tomorrow. The canal will still need fixing. The gods will still demand praise. But not now. Not here. Not tonight. The ache in your shoulders fades to a hum. The blisters on your hands no longer throb. Your thoughts drift to grain waving in the breeze, to the cool splash of river water on your feet, to the sound of your son whispering strange little symbols to himself as he writes. You did what you could. You carried your share. And now, it's enough. Let your breath slow. Let your body soften. Let the stars hold you in their quiet gaze. The night is long, but you are not alone. Sleep, builder of Egypt. You've earned it.